PowerPoint, it's a PDF, so I'll just keep scrolling down. Okay, so hi everyone, my name is Andrea Dominguez, and I'm a thesis master's student at California State University, Los Angeles. My thesis topic, in progress of course, is the connection between housing and green growth machines, how intersectionality is being ignored. So to go into a bit of background. So what got me into this topic? It was an urban sociologist by the name of Harvey Moltage. If anyone has heard of him, he's like one of my favorites. And he's an urban sociologist. And in 1976, he created a thesis called The City as a Growth Machine. I read this at community college, and I immediately caught my interest. And it was one of my top favorite sociological pieces. And it basically focuses on the role of elites, entrepreneurs, and politicians, and how they contribute to the growth of the city. Now, that may sound good. Yes, we need to grow the city and the economy and all that kind of stuff. But in this case, it was really just unfair practices. They were kind of like, if you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back. I want to get this piece of land developed. Can you bypass some different taxes for me, different laws or whatever, and I'll fund your next campaign. So that was basically what growth machines are. So I got really interested in the concept itself, and I started doing a bit more research on it. So when I entered graduate school, I was like, okay, I want to come back to the growth machine topic, and of course, Google. And I found this article that just blew my mind, and it was in 2013 by two authors, Richardson Dilworth and Robert Stokes, called Green Growth Machines, LEED Ratings and Value-Free Development, the Case of the Philadelphia Property Tax Abatement. It's a big mouthful, but I'll explain it. So basically what they did is they witnessed an attempt of growth machine activity to alter a city property tax in Philadelphia in order to meet the positive rankings of the LEED, which is basically Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design rating system. So in order to bypass this long process of creating different buildings within Philadelphia, they decided to say, hey, we want to speed up the process because the building we want to do is sustainable and it's environmentally friendly. So let us bypass all this stuff now, please and thank you. And so the gathering of these individuals to use environmental wellness and sustainability for profit is what Dilworth and Stokes called green growth machines. So when I read that, I was like, this is crazy. This is a new development for growth machines. This is something I never read before. So now going a lot more into green growth machines, we have our usual suspects, as I said before, which is elites, entrepreneurs, and politicians. The new addition to this would be nonprofit organizations. So I'm not saying that NPOs are like, yeah, we want to get involved in this. It's more like they're getting taken advantage of, especially if they're dealing, if they focus on environmental wellness and sustainability. Growth machines pretty much look out for them and they're like, hey, we want to fund you, we want to help you. And of course, a lot of NPOs, they're not going to say no. They want to help the environment. They want to make change for the better. But they're pretty much getting used in these situations. And it's sad because the lack of education that most NPOs have, they don't really know what the real motive is for the green growth machines that want to kind of collaborate with them. So I found all this out, read a bunch of articles, and it was apparent that green growth machines specifically affected classes differently. So I had to ask, who does it impact? So we have our high income crowd with a bunch of positive outcomes. There's a lot of positive outcomes when it comes to green infrastructure, when it comes to physical wellness, mental wellness. It just makes your neighborhood feel a lot better when you have parks, community gardens, and just different green spaces all over the place. And especially when you're in an urban environment, which is not that common. You either have to place it there or you build around it. And it also assists in the current battle against climate change, especially in urban areas. And so, may sound good a lot for high income individuals, but I found that completely unfair. Because when I looked at low income neighborhoods, green spaces are not that common in low income neighborhoods. And I had to ask, could they attain the same outcomes if we were to implement green spaces? I had this misconception in the beginning of, oh, we should implement green spaces into low income neighborhoods. What's the problem? Then, of course, connection with sociology and everything, gentrification, green gentrification to be exact. to put it bluntly, anything pretty much you're going to put new in a neighborhood, it could result in rising cost of property value. It could result in rent cost increase. So I had to ask, could they afford that? Could they really afford that? Low income renters. And all this talk of green space and putting it in their neighborhoods, since they cannot afford that, would the future of green spaces become sort of like a luxury? So these are the questions that I wanted to be answered. And to look more into this, of course, you have to delve into even more literature. So I had to go even more into it. And the literature that was available to look at green growth machines and the relationship between low-income neighborhoods, I couldn't find any that were more in the sociological lens. So I was like, okay, strike one, I have to look somewhere else. So I relied on the works of academics in the field of public policy, environmental science, urban studies, like a little bit of sociology, like one article that mentions sociology, and geography. So within this mixed bunch, I divided my review into 3 themes, which is evidence of classism and racism within the urban environment, the role of environmental governance, and just overall just green growth machine activity. So let's start with the first one. When it comes to addressing neighborhoods in the United States, especially urban neighborhoods, you cannot have this conversation without talking about redlining. And also just the overall uneven distribution of nature within low-income neighborhoods. And this is all due to the pretty much racist past of the United States government, giving banks the okay to withhold loans from Black individuals, pretty much depriving them to fund or even beautify their spaces within their homes or investing into their living. The lack of green spaces within this area is now just an opportunity to gain capital for green growth machines. All those pretty much blighted places in low-income neighborhoods, that's just like candies to them. Anything that's going to be in those low-income neighborhoods, they're going to get it for a low cost. And this cycle of inequality punishes low-income racial and ethnic minorities for being in the position that they're in. But past decisions such as redlining pretty much just paved a nice way for growth machines to thrive, no matter what form it has taken in. So we have our regular growth machine, but now, I don't know if I would call it a subcategory or the way it evolved into now this green growth machine. And one of my predictions is that pretty much the way in the beginning of redlining would pretty much like pave a way for just different types of growth machines to evolve. Growth machines that I don't even know about yet. Growth machines that are probably happening right now that don't have a lot of research within them. And also just looking at just the intersection between class and race, I then asked again, is our green space is going to become just a luxury that a lot of people just cannot afford? So to like go more into this, since we were talking about redlining, we have to go look at the role of environmental governance. We have to look at the government and just those who make decisions within the environmental governance in the United States. And though it exhibits itself to alleviate or try to alleviate the current sustainability crisis in the United States, they actually help contribute to green growth machines. So coming with a political and also a sociological lens, this was one of the only sociological articles that I found. Bludhorn noticed that there was a pattern within policymakers' choices when it came to environmental changes. So he was looking at different politicians of the United States, specifically who were talking about issues that have to do with climate change and sustainability. And he kind of categorized their decisions and their different actions into different sections. What they did is they promoted a lot of different political actors of like, this person believes we're in climate change and this person is good and we should really listen to them, blah, blah, and like that's it. Also, the act of helping the environment, he noticed the way they were speaking about climate change, and it was really pushed towards the individual is the problem, not the big corporations that are emitting toxic gases into the air, not factories that leak lead into front yards of low-income homes into the soil. It just shifts blame. And it does promote a sense of green capitalism because we feed into that. They say you should change your lifestyle. You should buy these products and try to do all this other thing to save the planet. It's up to you to do it. You are on your own. And it really promotes the trend of investing into sustainable products and really trying to embrace this green infrastructure. And to me, it seems that it's basically getting us comfortable, especially those of us who do live in low income neighborhoods, to get comfortable with them implementing it and to not see a problem behind it. That's pretty much the main point of Green Growth Machine, is that growth machine activity is going to occur in your neighborhood, but you shouldn't complain about it. Because why? Because it seems good. You're trying to help the environment. And also, it was just a good way of like, who's going to complain about that? Who's going to complain about like saving the environment? Who's going to complain about implementing green infrastructure? Me and other people. And so that's why I'm talking about it. That's why I'm trying to bring awareness to give a different perspective on how to spot these new developing growth machines. And even though the growth machine concept was made in 1976, in sociological terms, that is very new. That is still new. That is pretty much contemporary. And to look into this article by Dilworth and Stokes of when they first established Green Growth Machine, that was in 2013. So just to bring awareness that that is really, really new. And there's different developments that are to come further that I will explain in the next slide. So when it comes to environmental measures within the United States, we have to really talk about natural disasters. They impact everyone involved, of course, but historically, the ones that really suffer the most are low-income people of color. And Gold and Lewis, back in 2012, they looked at this certain canal, not 2012, 2016. They looked at this certain canal in Brooklyn, New York, and the canal was pretty like junkyard-esque, like toxic area. And city officials were like, okay, we're not gonna look at that, we're not gonna pay attention to it, and it might go away. And it did, because Hurricane Sandy came and pretty much cleaned the entire thing. And that saved them a bunch of money. However, that junkyard that was nearby was pretty much keeping the property value really low. Of course, there was the low-income neighborhoods surrounding it, and yeah, it was pretty much helping the renters or whoever, the homeowners over there, keeping property taxes pretty low, keeping all the property values pretty low. But once it was cleaned out, city officials and building developers were like, okay, cool, we're gonna use it for green infrastructure, try to pretty much figure out a way to implement this green infrastructure that would help in the future for different natural disasters. And so, long story short, this green infrastructure that they made with the canal didn't help that much. It was just pretty much like a park space, and they were I think pretty much now, they're building luxury apartments and all that kind of stuff over there. And so, the authors describe that when it comes to natural disasters, low-income people of color are hit twice. One by the disaster itself, and then with the aftermath. Because the recovery plans of government officials and urban planners pretty much ignore the needs of those who can't afford to rebuild their homes. Low-income individuals either have to stay there and rebuild, or they leave, and they get displaced from their area. And that is such a nice thing for green growth machines, because they get up and they leave, and that creates a new space to build whatever they want, whatever high income luxury housing, but of course it probably has like a garden on top, or like it has like solar panels, and ooh, it's good. But yeah, they pretty much take advantage of things that we can't control. And so that's one of the things that I wanted to highlight, which is natural disasters. That's one of the things to look for, and basically what happens. And of course, when you look at different natural disasters that happen in the United States, especially with the disaster that was Hurricane Katrina, and how a bunch of Black individuals and within their neighborhoods, they had to leave. They weren't getting any help at all. And to this day, even though Hurricane Katrina was so many years ago, it pretty much put a scar on the different Black communities that were impacted during that hurricane. So now that I talked about my themes, I'm going to talk about my pilot study, what I'm going to try to begin doing, what I'm already doing, and then moving on to my big thesis. So I plan to interview at least 20 POC renters from low-income neighborhoods in Los Angeles. Why Los Angeles? Well, one, it's convenient for me. And also, many low-income neighborhoods in Los Angeles have transformed into gentrified areas throughout many generations. And it's just a matter of, okay, well, which one? Because there's a lot of them. And with the interviews that I have done so far, they have been within areas of El Sereno, Highland Park, and Lincoln Park. And so you could say that'll be Northeast Los Angeles, and that's pretty much the neighborhood that I live in. And these were also chosen based on their median income being fairly low, but having an increase within the past decade. I received all this information from the Los Angeles GeoHub, which is a public platform for exploring, visualizing, and downloading location-based open data. And all the data is provided by the city of Los Angeles. So I used that to really just pick and choose the neighborhoods that I'm going to be interviewing the renters within them. And it also brings me to my sampling method, which is a convenience sample, since it is within my neighborhood and my reach. And I also posted a request for interviews on Facebook, on Facebook and the Nextdoor app. I don't know if anyone has heard of that one. The interviews will be semi-structured, and we'll have two sections. So the first one is just to get to know the individual and the relationship with their overall neighborhood, such as asking, how long have you been a renter? Why did you even pick this neighborhood? What are you looking for when you're looking for a place to rent? And the second half will be centered on their thoughts within green spaces, giving them a definition or asking them, do you even know what green spaces are? If so, give me your own definition. And if you don't, I will try my best to explain it. And then garnering their reaction when I discuss what could potentially happen if green spaces are implemented within their neighborhoods. So my hypothesis for a study is that low-income renters will not respond well to new green infrastructure within their neighborhoods due to its connection with rising rent costs. I've done a couple of interviews so far, and these are the quotes that stood out to me. We have Jake, from what I remember. He's been living in El Sereno for about 5 years, but he's always lived in low-income neighborhoods. He just happened to settle in El Sereno. And when we were talking about implementing green infrastructure into his neighborhood, and that could imply that prices of rent could go up, he says, I can barely afford to live by myself right now, and as my rent goes higher because of that. I mean, I wouldn't like that. I feel a bunch of people wouldn't like that. Like, we're just trying to live off what we're barely making right now. And then we have Gina, which I was really glad to get another perspective because she is much older than Jake, and she has lived in, I think it was Boyle Heights, for many, many years, but she barely became a renter about 3 years ago, like renting like herself, like out of her own money. And so we had this whole discussion of green infrastructure in her neighborhood and what she would think would, would she even like it in her neighborhood? And she was going on about, oh, I want new parks, community gardens. I want to go with my nephews over there. I want to go walk my dogs over there. Anytime I want to go hiking or anything like that, I don't like to go within this neighborhood. She has many bad experiences within that neighborhood. I have to go out somewhere, which is mostly high income areas such as like Pasadena. And so we're talking about all this, and I see her really like light up and talking about, oh, the changes that could occur in her neighborhood. And I felt bad because then I had to ask, well, what about rent prices and what about the cost? And I said, would you just like that? And she said, for the sake of my pockets, yeah. And I felt really bad because she says, brought me right back down to earth, man. So I felt really bad about that. But later on, she was like, no, it's realistic. That's reality. But it's nice to talk about and it's nice to fantasize about. So going on to 2 minutes. Okay. Going on to my research methods. So this is this is for the long term. This is for my thesis. I want to focus and I want to conduct a focus group with community leaders within low-income neighborhoods, specifically people of color, and basically just have an overall discussion about green spaces, discussions about green growth machines, and also share the results of the interviews, give them different quotes and see their perspectives on it. And the question is, why? Well, throughout my entire research, I didn't find any voices of low-income people of color. I didn't find anything of how they felt about these situations. It was mostly just analyzing what was going on to them. But I want to know, well, how are they feeling? How are they navigating this entire situation? And it's mostly, I just want to have a conversation with rather than at, which is kind of a common thing in academics. So I want to give them a position and I want to give them a voice within my reach of what I have, which is being in academia. And Limitations, of course, does not reach residents outside of Northeast LA. It is a small sample. This does not include homeowners or those who just don't rent or those who are houseless. And it does not include white residents in high-income neighborhoods, though that could be something later on that I would actually like to do, to see their perspective on green growth machines going on in their neighborhood. So the future of growth machines, it can be unpredictable and it can be really hard to catch. And though the concept was established in the 1970s in the sociological world, that's really new. And I encourage academics and non-academics to pay attention to the structures of how our urban areas are being developed. It's really unfair that elites and politicians get to create these plans and bypass laws in order to invest in structures that will benefit them. But what about us who are not in those high positions? What about everyone else? What about those that we don't get to hear their voice? So for future research that I or anyone else might be interested in is going into low-income neighborhoods, especially in the United States. Something else that I would like to do in the future is go to areas that were impacted by natural disasters, such as Hurricane Sandy, Katrina, and see what has the neighborhood turned into now. Now that the hurricane is gone and many years have passed, what is it now, and where did the previous residents go before? And who exactly was involved in these developments? Green growth machines position themselves to be the misfortune that these communities face. However, the discussion of their misfortunes in academic literature is not enough to vocalize what's going on. Green growth machines cannot thrive without the oppression of groups below them. And the continuation of this study will have a conversation with those who are at risk of being impacted by green growth machines. From there, academics in this field will have a better understanding of the position of vulnerable communities are put in, because we are listening to them. We are getting their words and their actual feelings about what is going on. And those are my citations, and thank you.